Welcome, deep divers. Get ready for your personal shortcut to becoming truly well-informed. We slice through the noise, get right to the good stuff.
Yeah, the surprising, the profound, the just plain funny insights hidden in the source material.
Exactly.
Yeah?
And today, wow, we're embarking on a really fascinating journey, I think, into the mind of a true musical titan,
Mm-hmm.
Paul McCartney. We're doing a deep dive into his 2001 album, Driving Rain.
And look, for this, we've got some exceptional sources. We're working mainly with a pretty comprehensive news release, the official stuff from Rogers and Cowan.
Right, the PR release?
Yeah, detailing the album's launch. But, and this is the goldmine, we also have this extensive, really unvarnished Q&A session with Paul McCartney himself.
Straight from the source.
Straight from the source. These documents, they give us this, it feels like an unprecedented, really intimate look into how Driving Rain was actually made.
Absolutely. So our mission today, folks, is to go way beyond just, an album review. We're here to unpack the unique creative process Paul really embraced for this project. We want to pull out those surprising insights into his whole artistic philosophy at the time.
And the stories, the often unseen kind of personal stories behind the songs on Driving Rain.
Yeah, we want to give you, our listeners, a fresh, really inside perspective on a musical legend's work, understanding his choices during what was, well, a pretty pivotal period for him.
So yeah, prepare to hear it directly from him, basically.
Yeah.
All the nuance, all the unexpected turns, it's going to be good.
Okay, so to really get Driving Rain, we need to start with the basics, put it in context.
Lay the groundwork.
Exactly. So from the news release itself, the official scoop is that Driving Rain was Paul McCartney's first studio album of entirely new original songs in 4 years.
4 years, that's a long time in McCartney years, isn't it?
It really is. For someone that prolific, a 4-year gap, it immediately signals something's up, right? Potential shift, maybe a deliberate pause before something new.
A creative recharge, maybe.
Could be. The album itself was set for release on November 13th. And given our sources, that puts its debut right in 2001.
Oh.
It features 15 fresh McCartney compositions, all recorded that same year, 2001, out in Los Angeles.
15 tracks, recorded in L.A. Got it.
Now, here's a little wrinkle, something kind of interesting that popped up comparing to sources.
Mm-hmm.
The official news release says 15 tracks, plain and simple. But in that Q&A session with Paul, he later mentions that they actually recorded 16 tracks in just the first 2 weeks of the sessions.
Wow, okay. That's fast.
Right. And at another point, he even talks about recording 18 songs in total for the whole project.
Huh. So 15, 16, 18?
Yeah, it's not like a mistake in the documents, I don't think. It's more, it's a really fascinating glimpse into just how dynamic album production can be.
Totally. Songs get cut, things change, especially if you're working quickly.
Exactly. It shows maybe songs were worked on, maybe shelved, maybe they evolved during recording, even for someone like Paul McCartney. Oh, and the record label, by the way, was Capitol Records.
That little inconsistency in track numbers, it's actually quite revealing, isn't it?
How so?
Well, it suggests, like you said, a really intense period of creative output, just churning stuff out. And maybe that selection process, deciding what actually made the final cut, was happening right up until the end.
Makes sense.
And what's really fascinating is how this album was positioned. Not just, hey, here's new music, but as the significant step after that 4-year gap.
Right, the longest gap he'd had for new songs at that point, I think.
Pretty much. In the music biz, especially back then, 4 years is practically an eternity for someone who used to put out albums constantly.
Yeah.
So it really flagged it as potentially a fresh sound, maybe a new direction for him, maybe even a deliberate reinvention, or at least, a clear break from his previous, maybe more polished stuff.
Yeah, the news release even mentions him bucking the trend of recording for months on this one.
Exactly. It implies the streamlined, maybe even kind of raw approach was intentional.
And the team he pulled together to get that sound is also really notable and, well, kind of different for him.
Yeah. Who'd he work with?
The main producer was David Kahn.
Yeah.
Now, instead of his usual, longtime collaborators.
The George Martin or later producers he'd stuck with?
Right. Paul decided to cut this album with a brand new 3-piece band. And the news release specifically points out they're all American musicians.
Oh, interesting. Who were they?
We're talking Rusty Anderson on guitar.
Okay, know him. Great player.
Gabe Dixon on keyboards.
Mm-hmm.
And Abe Laborio Jr. on drums.
Abe. Wow. Okay, that's a powerhouse rhythm section right there.
Definitely. So it's not just a new lineup. It feels like a very specific choice of talent, probably bringing a whole different energy, a different feel.
Absolutely. American session guys often have that immediate reactive thing down.
And Paul, of course, was the lead artist, vocals, guitar, piano, but he also specifically took on the role of producing all the bass parts himself.
Ah, okay. So the McCartney bass is front and center, produced by the man himself.
You got it. So, okay, think about it. New producer, David Kahn, fresh, all-American band. What kind of sonic landscape does that suggest? Especially given that fast recording pace you mentioned.
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Because the collaborators, they really shaped the sound profoundly. David Kahn, for instance, he was known for a more contemporary vibe.
Right, maybe a bit more modern than Paul's usual fare.
Yeah, sometimes even electronic-inflected sounds. He'd worked with people like Tony Bennett, but also the Strokes around that time. So that's a clear signal, bringing in a certain crispness, maybe a modern sensibility Paul hadn't explored much before.
Okay.
And then this new band, Rusty, Gabe, Abe, like I said, they bring this vibrant, spontaneous energy. American players, especially those guys, are often amazing at improvising, reacting in the moment.
Which sounds like it fits with that quick recording idea.
Perfectly. It aligns exactly with the whole philosophy Paul adopted for this record, which we'll get into. Rusty Anderson, he's super versatile on guitar. Abe Laboriel Jr., I mean, he's just a monster drummer. Incredible groove, incredible precision, but also feel.
Right.
And the fact that Paul did the bass parts himself, produced them himself, that means his legendary bass lines, those melodic foundational parts, would be right there, probably quite direct, providing that warmth and musicality that's just pure McCartney.
So the whole team seems geared towards, what? A sound that's fresh, spontaneous, but still anchored by his core strengths.
Exactly. Rooted in his melodic genius, especially the bass, but maybe less layered, less meticulously polished than, say, Flaming Pie might have been. More immediate. Which leads us right into the heart of Driving Rain, doesn't it? The why behind it. McCartney's whole creative philosophy for this specific album.
Yeah, he seems very upfront about it being different.
He is. Right in the Q&A, he just lays it out there. Quote, "This album is not what you'd expect from me."
That's quite a statement to lead with. Setting the stage.
Totally. It suggests a really deliberate, conscious shift in how he approached making music this time. And the whole project apparently started pretty simply.
How so?
Just a suggestion from a guy named Bill Porricelli from a New York office. He basically encouraged Paul to think about working with new producers, shake things up a bit, inject a fresh perspective.
Paul went for it.
He did. And his choice, David Kahn, was based on his impression that Kahn had, and this is Paul's description, a very good high-level approach and was very musical but modern.
So he respected his chops, even if he didn't know him well.
Exactly. Paul admits he didn't know Kahn well personally, which, for an artist of his stature, that's quite a leap of faith, isn't it?
Huge, handing over the reins to some extent.
Right. But he respected Kahn's input, what he wanted to do with the sound, and this willingness, to step into the unknown with a new team, to maybe cede a bit of that control. That's really fundamental to the whole story of Driving Rain.
That willingness to embrace the unknown? It's compelling, and it connects directly to this specific recording approach he adopted, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Something that sounds very early Beatles.
You mean the Monday morning method?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell us about that. He calls it doing it the Monday morning way.
Right. And what he means by that, in his own words, is we came into the studio on Monday morning, I'd show them a song, and we'd start doing it.
Wow. Just like that. No big rehearsals, no pre-planned charts.
Pretty much, just raw, immediate creation. He specifically connects this back to making Run Devil Run, that rock and roll covers album.
Yeah.
And even more significantly, back to the actual Beatles recording sessions, he said he realized, doing interviews for Run Devil Run, that back in the day, often John, George, Ringo, even Jeff Emmerich, their engineer, they frequently didn't know what song they'd be working on next.
Paul would just bring something in?
Yeah, he'd introduce a song and they'd just figure it out. The music would flow organically. So he decided very intentionally to bring back that element of no homework for Driving Rain.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
A conscious effort to recapture that initial spark.
Absolutely. Maintaining that raw, immediate, kind of unvarnished energy that, let's face it, characterized some of his most iconic early work. And if you think about it, connect this to the bigger picture. This whole philosophy of no homework, spontaneous creation, it's pretty radical compared to how most big albums were made then or even now.
Especially for someone like McCartney, who could have commanded infinite studio time, planned every note.
Exactly. It's way less about meticulous planning and layering every little sound and much more about capturing this organic, in-the-moment vibe.
It suggests a lot of confidence.
Huge confidence in the songs themselves, the raw material, and, crucially, in those musicians he hired. Rusty, Gabe, Abe. He had to trust them implicitly to respond, to contribute right there on the spot, without weeks of prep.
And the pace reflects that trust, right?
Absolutely. The whole album, he says, was made from beginning to end in about 5 weeks.
5 weeks for a full album?
Yeah, and McCartney emphasizes this. He compares it directly to his past, saying, quote, "That's still pretty good going, but that is the kind of work rate we do in the Beatles."
Huh. Almost like throwing down a gauntlet. We can still do it fast.
Totally. It highlights this return to efficiency, to capturing ideas immediately before they get stale.
And he also changed his working hours, didn't he? Moved away from those legendary all-nighters.
He did. He consciously decided to ditch those prior all-night sessions, the famous Beatles and Wings marathons starting mid-morning and going till dawn.
Why the change?
He basically realized they were trying too hard in those long, grueling sessions. And very simply, he now values having a life.
Can't blame him there.
Not at all. He admits they got some great stuff out of that vibe back then, pushing boundaries, experimenting till they dropped. But he clearly prefers a more balanced, more sustainable way of working now.
It's not just about speed then, but a healthier process.
I think so, a more holistic approach. And this ties into what he calls the rubber soul process influencing Driving Rain.
Referencing that mid-period Beatles album,
Yeah.
How did that influence things?
Well, Rubber Soul was a point where the Beatles were expanding their sound, but still keeping that core live-in-the-studio feel. For Paul, on Driving Rain, this meant he focused primarily on the essence of the song, the melody, the lyrics, his performance.
And let Khan handle more of the technical stuff.
Exactly, particularly the mixes. Khan would come up with ideas, even DJ the mixes himself, experimenting. So Paul could work, early evenings, 6 or 7, then leave Khan and the team to play around with it all.
Which led to unexpected things.
That's what Paul says. Little exciting directions that none of us expected. It sounds like a genuinely collaborative, unburdened creative space, where those happy accidents weren't just tolerated, they were kind of welcomed.
That's a fascinating shift, trading intensity for balance, delegating more. So if he's doing that, trusting Khan with the mixes, focusing on the song's core, what did that mean for Paul's own role in the studio? I mean, he can play everything. How did he define his job on this record?
That's such an insightful question because you're right. He could orchestrate every single element if he wanted to, but he chose a very specific focus. And one of the most profound things he talks about in the Q&A, a realization he apparently had working on Run Devil Run.
Yeah.
He remembered, fundamentally, that he's mainly the bass player.
Mainly the bass player after everything he's done.
That's how he frames it. He defines that core role for himself in this really simple, almost Zen way. It's simple and satisfying. I sing and I play bass.
Wow.
Obviously, he plays guitar, piano, other things brilliantly. We all know that. But he sees the bass as his anchor, his fundamental identity within the band dynamic on this project.
That's kind of incredible. For someone of his stature to boil it down like that.
It is. Think about it. A musician who could lead from any position, choosing to return to that foundational role. It speaks volumes, I think, about the power of focusing on your core strength, on what feels most authentic, instead of trying to juggle everything or, as he puts it, overcomplicating things.
And he admits he does that sometimes. Overcomplicates.
Oh, yeah, very openly. He says he probably does overcomplicate things, particularly with music. That self-awareness is really key here.
So he actively fought against it on Driving Rain.
He says he's specifically focused on avoiding that tendency, especially with the initial batch of songs recorded in February. He even quotes himself practically pleading with the engineers. "You're not going to add anything on them, are you?"
Protecting the raw takes.
Exactly. It highlights his deep-seated belief that, quote, that's always the risk with music. You get a perfectly good song, and then you think you'll put some strings on it, and you totally mess it up.
We've all heard albums like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's this testament to his belief in simplicity, in the integrity of that first idea. Sometimes the best thing you can do is just strip away the fluff, let the song breathe.
Okay, so from his role as the bass player primarily, let's shift to the songs themselves, the actual writing. If he's embracing this spontaneous, anti-formula approach in the studio, how does that translate to the songwriting? Where does that spark even come from for him?
Well, he's incredibly candid about it, almost defiant, you could say. He confesses, quote, "There are tricks that I know, but I really don't know exactly how to write songs, and I don't want to know."
Doesn't want to know.
Yeah. He compares it to getting dressed. "I want to dress how I feel like dressing on any given day. I don't want it to be a formula." That resistance to a fixed formula that's absolutely central to the whole intuitive, fluid vibe of Driving Rain.
Can you give an example? Like, how did a specific song come about?
Okay, perfect example. The title track, Driving Rain.
Yeah.
The origin story is almost hilariously mundane, but it's so revealing.
Right.
He wrote it in L.A. in February. It was after just driving around in a little Corvette, having lunch in Malibu. Ordinary day, he sits down at a piano and just starts a song, kind of half-baked, letting it flow.
Standard enough so far.
But then comes the spark. From this totally unexpected visual detail, he tells this anecdote about seeing an unusual object, apparently with some kind of LED box on the wall, and also noticing a door in the bloody place. And just seeing those things made him spontaneously say out loud, "Something's open."
Just like that. An observation.
Just like that. A casual, almost random observation. But it became the core, the trigger for the song. He took those words, "Something's open, it's my heart," and it just instantly came out as the opening line.
Wow. Finding the profound in the everyday.
Exactly. It's a testament to being incredibly open and receptive to the world around you, right? Even the seemingly insignificant details, they can trigger these deeper connections.
So creativity isn't always some grand muse visiting.
Not at all, according to this. It absolutely emphasizes that it doesn't have to be some sweeping, dramatic event or some torturous process. It can spark from the mundane, the unexpected, that bit of freedom, as Paul calls it.
Just being open.
Being profoundly open. Think about how often we just filter out the little odd details in our day. McCartney shows they can be incredibly fertile ground. And related to that, Paul describes the lyrics on the album generally as, quote, kind of quite simple. There's nothing deeply deep.
He owns the simplicity.
Totally. He talks about just spinning off things, not worrying if he'd heard a phrase somewhere before, even combining bits from two songs or fragments of songs together. It's less about achieving literary perfection and more about capturing an immediate feeling, an authentic flow.
Which brings us to that idea he talks about, the complexity of simplicity.
Ah, yes. This is such a powerful insight, a real aha moment in the Q&A. He observes, and this quote is really worth chewing on, but that goes back to this idea about the complexity of simplicity, that if somebody writes something that is complicated, it is naturally assumed to be better.
Right. We often think that. Complex equals clever.
Exactly, he continues. Whereas if you write something simple, it is generally perceived to be lesser, yet it is far more difficult to be simple than it is to be complex.
Wow. It's harder to be simple.
That's his argument. And it's profound because it completely challenges that common assumption about artistic merit. It champions the elegance, the sheer difficulty of achieving pure, unadorned expression.
Think about Yesterday or Let It Be. Deceptively simple.
Precisely. He argues that kind of simplicity is why they resonate so universally. It's a real challenge to how we often value art, reminding us that genius can hide in plain sight, unburdened by showing off its cleverness. It's about the effort, the craft required to distill something to its absolute essence.
That's a fantastic point. The art of distillation, not just addition. Okay, let's really unpack some of the individual gems on Driving Rain then, because like you said, the stories behind them offer these great windows into his process.
Absolutely. Where should we start?
How about Your Loving Flame? It has that almost cinematic origin story.
Right. That one started in India in 2001, but the actual spark hit him very specifically on the 36th floor of the Carlyle Hotel in New York City.
Quit the setting.
Yeah. He describes walking in, seeing a Cole Porter movie on TV, grand piano, window overlooking Central Park, and the song just came to him really fast. That instant flash of inspiration, blending a classic romantic vibe with whatever he was feeling.
Okay, then From a Lover to a Friend.
Yeah.
That was the single, right? Featured in Vanilla Sky.
That's the one. And it has a really interesting evolution. It was originally in standard 44 time.
Pretty straightforward.
Yeah, but later, Paul added this surprising 54 bar into the pattern.
Oh, okay. Like a little rhythmic twist?
Exactly. He calls the song a strange hybrid because of things like that, and also describes it as a collection of bits from various songs that I liked, all glued together like an odd collage.
So patching ideas together.
That 54 bar, it's not just quirky, it breaks the expectation, creates this subtle tension that makes it stand out from a standard ballad, a little flash of experimentation within that spontaneous framework.
Did he work with anyone specific on that?
Yeah, he mentions working with a producer named Eddie at his own studio, and together they apparently stitched together a couple of bits that weren't meant to go together, but Paul felt the demo had this really intimate quality.
And the lyrics. Transitioning from lovers to friends.
Yeah, that's the theme. And he adds that if you're lucky, you get to remain friends. But he also points out, again, reinforcing that simplicity thing, that a lyric like, the meaning you need is on your shoulder, isn't meant to be deep. It just felt right.
Okay, now Rinse the Raindrops. This one has that wild story about his voice.
Oh, yeah, this is a good one. So he's in India, and some carpet salesman just casually tells him his voice sounds raw.
Out of the blue. Okay.
Right. Then, almost like fate, the very next day, Paul says he experienced a real ripoff. His voice really went. Just lost it.
Oh, wow. Nightmare for a singer.
Totally. He said his first thought was, oh my God, never mind, don't panic. And his plan was just to tackle the easy songs first in the studio.
But Rinse the Raindrops isn't exactly an easy song, is it? It's huge.
Not at all. It became this sprawling, almost defiant 10-minute track. And they recorded it after the band had only jammed on the idea for about half an hour.
Incredible. How did he manage with his voice gone?
Well, he specifically recalls singing the main lyric 48 times in the session, really pushing, trying to get something out of that challenging situation. Despite the setback, though, he's quick to assert his voice is trained, it's never been raw, and he doesn't even use vocal warm-ups. He feels it hasn't really changed much over the years. That whole story, the spontaneity, the energy, even when facing that vocal issue, it's pretty telling, isn't it?
It really is. The anecdote about his voice, then recovering enough to deliver a 10-minute jam that he felt came good,
Yeah.
it just highlights that resilience, that intuition that seems central to how this album was made.
Yeah, it's like harnessing a challenge, turning it into creative fuel instead of letting it stop him, trusting his instrument even when it seemed like it was failing.
Okay, what about America?
America. Well, unsurprisingly, he notes it was made in the USA.
Makes sense.
And he compares it to Bits of Ram.
Oh, interesting comparison. Ram has that raw, almost homemade feel in places.
Exactly, suggesting a return to that kind of unfettered energy. He just says it naturally took on this American feel, which gave it a little added kick because, as he puts it, America is the land of many of our heroes. So drawing inspiration from the place itself.
Nice. And About You. That was from India.
Yes, specifically Goa. Written during a relaxing holiday start back in 2001, he mentions reminiscing about his Maharishi days from 25 years before visits to Rishikesh. So India clearly holds deep meaning for him.
And how was it written?
Very simply, on a small travel guitar while just chilling on a Goa beach. And here's a cool detail. Apparently, a copy of the song, or maybe the lyrics, actually appeared in the India Times shortly after.
No way. Instant publication?
Pretty much. Another track from Goa is Lonely Road. Again, reflecting that vibe of chilling out on the beach, by the sea.
Sounds like a productive holiday.
Definitely. He describes it as time for a quiet spell when it's always cool for me to go off and fondle my guitar. He calls the song itself a defiant song against loneliness, about not wanting to be brought down.
A personal theme, but universal.
Absolutely. And he really justifies taking that holiday time. He says it's essential for a songwriter. You've got to have a lot of time to yourself. He contrasts it with office work, saying, making up a song is always a great pleasure. It doesn't seem like hard work to me.
So creativity isn't a chore for him. It's nurtured by that space.
Exactly. It's inherent, joyful, needs room to breathe.
Okay. Then there's Riding to Jaipur, which, funnily enough,
Wasn't written in India. Yeah, he points that out. Funnily enough, the melody for this was written outside of India.
where'd it come from?
He mentions carrying that little Martin travel guitar, the one Linda gave him, and taking it with him to the Maldives. So again, creativity is just always switched on wherever he happens to be, that continuous hum of ideas.
And she's given up talking.
Yeah.
That is a specific inspiration, right?
Yeah, a really unique one. Inspired by someone he knew as a kid who actually stopped talking for a whole year while they were in school together.
Wow, that's memorable.
Definitely. The song itself was written a couple of years before Driving Rain, though, while he was on holiday in Jamaica.
So it wasn't written for the album initially.
Seems not. The interesting part for the Driving Rain sessions was that the song wasn't finished. He had to create the middle section right there in the LA studio.
More spontaneity.
Exactly. He describes it as finding a little freedom. He actually ran upstairs to the lounge to quickly finish writing it, capturing the idea while it was hot.
Love it. What about Back in the Sunshine Again? That one goes back even further.
Yeah, written in Arizona about 5 years before the album came out, so maybe around 1996.
It wasn't his son involved.
Yes. This is really lovely. His son, James, was a guest artist on rhythm and actually helped write the song. Paul credits him with contributing to the riff and the bridge.
A proper family collaboration. That's cool.
Very cool. Shows how inspiration can be shared, developed together.
Let's circle back quickly to I Do. You mentioned it as one of the India songs.
Right, and Paul uses it as a perfect example of that studio spontaneity.
How so?
He just started singing it low, but then, unplanned, he easily jumped up an octave. He calls it a little signature thing that happened, which I didn't mean to happen, but it's good that there are those little accents.
Embracing the unexpected again.
Totally. Seeing those moments not as mistakes, but as gifts that add character.
Okay, your way. Another from Jamaica.
Yep, from Jamaica. He says it has a little country feel, showing his range, and significantly, it was the first song on the album where the band, Rusty, Gabe, and Abe, actually sang harmonies.
Ah, bringing their voices into the mix.
Integrating that collective sound. And Paul highlights this interesting lyrical idea. It's a bit like two sides of a personality singing to each other, like a man and a woman. I like it, please don't take my heart away. It's happy where it is, so let it stay. A simple structure, but expressing that complex internal dialogue.
Spinning on an Axis is another one inspired by his son.
Yes. This one came about while he was visiting relatives in New Hampshire. The direct inspiration was James talking about how the sun doesn't actually go down, it's the earth that's turning around.
A kid's perspective sparking a song.
Exactly. Paul remembers having a little keyboard thing there, and James was playing a little riff on it, and I was doing a parody rap thing, just goofing off with no real melody on those thoughts of spinning on an axis. He even recorded that raw initial goofing around session on a little cassette, preserving the spark.
Amazing. And Tiny Bubble. He uses that one to make a point, doesn't he?
He does. He mentions it was a demo he made back in Scotland, and he uses it specifically to illustrate the danger of overproducing. He says something like if he'd played Ringo, presumably meaning Ringo Starr, as a benchmark for simple, effective drumming, too much complicated stuff, he and they are all screwed up with massive overdubs. It's classic McCartney, just reinforcing his aim for that simple four-piece band sound on this album. Less is more.
Got it. And finally, Heather, a lovely anecdote there.
Oh, it's charming. Came about early one morning. Paul just got up, started jamming on the piano, as he does.
And Heather heard it.
Yeah, his partner, Heather Mills, at the time. She apparently heard it and asked him, "That's great, which Beatles song is that?"
Huh? High praise indeed.
The highest. And Paul says he jokingly replied, "Oh, I said it's called Heather." It just perfectly captures how his new stuff, even when created spontaneously, can still have that timeless, instantly recognizable McCartney magic, like it's always existed.
That's brilliant. Okay, so zooming out from the individual songs, looking at the album and the whole process, what larger lessons or philosophies does Driving Rain reveal about Paul's relationship with music, creativity, even life itself, especially this far into his career?
Well, there are some really interesting reflections in the Q&A, on lyrics, for instance. He admits he actually sweated the lyrics on Driving Rain to make them very poetic and articulate.
So he did work hard on them, despite saying they weren't deep.
It seems like it. But then, in the same breath, he reflects on classic Beatles lyrics like, I love, love me do, you know I love you. He acknowledges they seem simple, but argues that obvious means a lot to people.
So directness has power.
That's his point. He firmly believes people shouldn't always demand complicated literacy in pop lyrics. For him, the emotional hit, the direct communication, often trumps complex wordplay.
And he connects this to music transcending language, right?
He does. He tells this fascinating story about seeing a girl singing in Montreal. He assumed it was French, but when he asked, she told him it isn't any language, just sounds conveying feeling.
Wow.
And that really resonated with him. It led him to explain that he wants his music to be something everyone to get, meaning it should primarily communicate a feeling, a pure emotion, even before you process the words. That's how it breaks down barriers.
That really emphasizes the universality of music, doesn't it?
Yeah. Absolutely. It challenges that whole idea that lyrics must be profound or explicitly understood to be powerful. It highlights the raw power of sound, melody, rhythm, emotion to connect with us on a fundamental level, regardless of language. Music speaks emotion first.
He also has some interesting thoughts on music education.
Huh. Yeah, slightly controversial, maybe. He basically suggests that Beatles songs are actually better for teaching kids music than classical music is.
Better than Bach or Mozart. Bold claim.
Bold indeed. He implies that understanding music, really getting it, might be better approached through something like a poetry class, focusing on feeling, rhythm, expression, rather than a rigid music class obsessed with technical theory.
Questioning the whole traditional way it's taught.
Fundamentally. And this ties into his embrace of a bit of freedom and the unknown in his own process. He actually describes having a slight edge of panic during recording as not necessarily bad.
Panic is good.
He frames it as an exciting thing to do. His theory is if you see something interesting, maybe an unexpected idea or direction, it focuses your attention intensely and you feel compelled to act on it immediately. You can't put it off.
Whereas if things are too comfortable,
You'll find excuses. He says if you get an excuse to put stuff off, you will. So that urgency, that slight pressure, drives his spontaneity and that rapid recording method.
which leads directly to his belief in first thought, best thought.
Exactly. When he talks about songs like, I think he mentions a track called Motown that didn't make the album, or Spinning on an Axis, he stresses how much he likes working quickly, avoiding messing around. Why? Because too many possibilities can pop up and just muddy the waters.
Analysis paralysis.
Pretty much. His conclusion is stark. I think that's a good thing. First thought, best thought. Nearly always there's something that sort of instant karma having to do it means that it turns out to be the best thing. Trust the instinct. Trust that initial impulse.
And looking back at his whole life, the journey, does he still find magic in it all? After decades of fame and creation.
Oh, absolutely. He reflects on the whole art Liverpool, the Beatles' explosion, the global magic of the 60s, ideas of enlightenment, and he shares this beautiful personal paradox.
What's that?
While he can, on one level, rationally explain how a song like Yesterday just arrived, fully formed in a dream.
Which is already pretty magical.
Right. Even while explaining it logically, he also holds this firm belief that there's always more to learn, and fundamentally that there's more to life than meets the eye. He retains this sense of wonder, this feeling that transcends pure rational explanation.
That's lovely.
It is. And he wraps it up with this really powerful summary about the magic of music itself. He says, quote, "It's like how can a piece of music make you cry or really top up your emotions when it hasn't got any words?"
Good question.
I don't understand how that can happen, but I understand that it does happen, and I think it's really cool. I enjoy magic, and it's something in life that I'm very glad of. It just perfectly encapsulates his lifelong relationship with his art. He's still amazed by its power.
So wrapping this all up,
Mm-hmm.
what does this deep dive into Driving Rain mean for you, our listeners? We've really unpacked a master musician returning to spontaneity, haven't we?
Definitely. Exploring that surprising simplicity behind art that lasts.
And hearing those really personal, often funny behind-the-scenes stories
Mm-hmm.
that just infuse the work with so much more meaning. We've seen him step back into that core role, embrace intuition.
Find profound inspiration in just, looking out a window or noticing a sign on a door.
So the final thought to leave you with, Paul McCartney's whole approach to Driving Rain, it really challenges us, doesn't it? To think about where creativity, maybe even fulfillment, truly comes from.
Yeah. Is it always in the meticulous planning, the endless refining? Or is there real power in just having the courage to embrace the unknown, to trust your gut, to find that magic in the unplanned moments?
That's a great question. What insights from his process, that Monday morning method, jumping right in,
Or the value he places on first thought, best thought.
or that profound idea about the complexity of simplicity?
Right. Could you apply any of that to your own creative work? Or maybe even just how you tackle everyday tasks? Could fostering a bit more spontaneity, a bit less overthinking, actually unlock something valuable in your own life?
Something definitely worth pondering. We really hope this deep dive encourages you to maybe go back and listen to Driving Rain or any McCartney music with these stories and philosophies in mind. Listen for that spontaneity.
Listen for the joy, the simplicity, the unexpected turns.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive today.